Hi, my love. Welcome to the Gemma Hanley Podcast. My name is Gemma. I'm your host. This is the space where I have honest conversations about overcoming anxiety and overwhelm so that you can calm your nervous system and feel really confident and happy and calm from within yourself. Along the way, I share my own stories of holistically healing 23 years of anxiety and depression myself. And so if you're a woman seeking answers to perfectionism, people-pleasing, burnout, resistance, you may love, you're in the right place. Let's do it. Let's begin. And before we begin, I want to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which I am recording from, which is the Gubbi Gubbi tribe. And I want to extend that acknowledgement to their elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as anybody of Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander heritage watching this replay. Why, hello, gorgeous woman, and welcome back to the potty. I'm excited and lit up and ready for today's conversation, one of my ultimate favorite conversation topics, brave boundaries, and also one of the most common experiences I had personally when I first started getting serious about setting boundaries that were true and right for me. It's also a very common question I get from my clients and that we work through in coaching as well. So I thought, why not let us dip in to a conversation about what is going on here, right? When we know that the boundary we have set is definitely true and right and authentic for us. There's no question about that. And that's often because we've done a lot of back and forth and a lot of deep contemplation and consideration. And maybe we've even waited as long as possible before implementing this boundary because we've tried so many other things as well, right? So we know it's right. We know it's true for us. And yet after setting it, we're still having this experience where internally there's some chaos and inner conflict happening. Yeah, we're feeling really stimulated and we're feeling triggered. And this might be showing up with, replaying the events of what happened prior to you setting the boundary or when you set the boundary or what didn't happen. Those events are replaying over and over again in your mind. There might be a lot of overthinking that is taking place and a general feeling of discomfort, maybe distaste or intolerance for the person or the situation that isn't actually in your life either at all or in the same form because you have set this boundary, right? And you've followed through on it. And yet, it's a memory or an event or a topic that whenever you think about it or whenever you talk about it, there is this internal charge. It's not feeling neutral. It is not feeling peaceful. It is not something that you feel calm or content or at peace with. And so why the fuck does that happen? Why is it that after I've gone to all of this effort and all of this discomfort to set a boundary that I wish I maybe didn't have to set, that I'm still left in this position where I don't feel really good about it at all. And I struggle to think about it or like to really let myself, if I let myself think about it, it leaves this uncomfortable feeling in my body or I actually can't stop thinking about it. It keeps showing up. Anytime I sit still long enough or there's some silence or I'm trying to fall asleep or maybe in the middle of the night or maybe in your dreams, it is still popping up. That's the conversation I want to have. And before we dive into it, I do want to contrast the difference between what I mean when I say a boundary that has been set and still feels triggering versus a boundary that has been set and feels more neutral. You do feel at peace with that. And how I would explain that is that it's a boundary that has been integrated as a brave boundary from a place of healing. Yeah. So we're going to get into that because sometimes the subtleties of, no, like I think I'm doing that right and I'm doing everything I know how, has us also accidentally convincing ourselves that there's nothing more to it
And so we must just have to get on with it, or this must just be what boundaries are like. And that's definitely not the case. So I'm going to just run through a couple of different ways, in addition to what I have, that we can notice that there is still a stimulus in the body around a certain boundary, a person, an event that has taken place, versus what it looks like, sounds like, feels like when that has been neutralized and it is being integrated from a healing place and with a healing approach, as opposed to perhaps using the boundary accidentally or because it's the best we know how, right? This isn't bad, it's not wrong, it's not shameful. We're talking about the facts of what's happening here so that we can be clear on what would need to be done differently so that we can feel more neutral and calm. So perhaps where instead the boundary is being used as a protective mechanism, or this is the only way I know how to feel in control, how to feel safe, how to reduce these triggered states in my body, even though they're not completely gone. Or maybe the boundary actually has a little bit of this like self-righteous fuck you energy attached to it, right? Where it's not very clean. As I said, it's still completely right, true, and authentic, the type of boundary you've set, but the energy and the attitude underlying it, there's still something to be looked at there, right? Because it's like this, I'm right, you're wrong, you're out, that kind of energy, which stays in our body, right? It actually doesn't impact the other person. It stays with us. And so, this is one of the ways that we can identify there is still a trigger attached to the boundary, is where we've created the distance, like the physical, literal, intellectual distance or change it is that we need. And yet there is still something within us, right? Like within me and my body that is still taking place, even though the boundary has been set. So that's very revealing that there's a triggered state happening about that. So like I said before, it can be overthinking, replaying of the events, feelings of inner conflict, inner tension, ruminating. There might be certain sensations in the body. So it could just feel like this uneasiness, or maybe even a light nauseousness, or your stomach is just not feeling relaxed, or there's a tightness across your chest, or you're noticing that you're clenching your jaw. Maybe you notice that you can't fully relax and you're a bit jumpy. There might still be some significant and maybe even big emotions, right? So even though the boundary has been set, there's this feeling of resentment or bitterness or anger or deep hurt. Feeling really, really hurt by the situation. And this is especially true where we feel like our hand has been forced, and we might actually be really available to share very transparently about what isn't feeling good to us and what we would like to change, and, even put forward some suggestions of what more connection might look like. And that other person doesn't have the emotional capacity to be able to meet us on that. And so we feel like we've been left with no other choice but to set this boundary. And so there can be this deep unresolved hurt that is still stored there in the body. They're just some examples. Shame is a very big one as well, right? And this is where we might sit down multiple times and reflect on what's happened and even map it out or talk it out with a friend or a loved one. And every single time we do that, we come to the same conclusion that, I've done this in a loving way. I've done, I tried so many other things. I was as kind as possible. I'm doing what I genuinely feel is the best outcome, for me and for the other person as well. And yet there's this feeling of being a bad person, or this feeling that you've done something wrong, right? And that will often come from either a reference point outside of us. Guilt can be part of this too, but a reference point outside of us where we're feeling judged, where we're feeling misunderstood, where people might literally, truly be talking about you behind your back, and there isn't the ability, or there hasn't been the ability found yet, to become okay with that from within yourself, to allow people to dislike you, to allow people to disagree with you, to allow people to misunderstand you, and not have that impact whether or not that means you're a good or bad person. Not letting that be the measure, right? Someone else's opinion be the measure of whether or not you're a good person, when you know that the behaviors you've chosen and the choices you've made have been loving, and you've taken ownership and you've apologized and you've owned your role. And yeah, that there is this reference point that is true of you being a good person, right? And yet there's this feeling inside that you're not. And so that's something that would need to be explored further, and absolutely can be. I've done this multiple times within the relationship with myself. It will especially be true for you if you're a woman who is so open to being wrong, right? Like really open to taking on feedback, really open to being curious and questioning and being patient. Yeah, that with that openness comes an analysis, right? Of, okay, well, here's their experience, here's mine, which, when I review this and feel into this and look at all angles of this and accept that there are different perspectives, where do I stand then? And what role do I feel and believe that I've played then? And what might I need to take accountability for? Or also, though, what am I maybe taking too much responsibility for? And so when we are a person that is open to being wrong, which I think is a beautiful quality, that can bring with it the exploration of shame and guilt and, where different pieces sit. And we need to have skills of emotional intelligence and to be able to go into the body somatically and work with those parts and feel them and release them and move beyond them and get clear on the truth and the belief system that we want to operate from, in order to not feel burdened by that, in order to not feel the rumination and the replaying of things over and over again, which just leaks out so much of our time, energy, mental space to something that is not helping us move forwards and live more of a life that feels good for us, right? So that's just touching on some of the emotions. Overthinking, I said insomnia, definitely. This stuff shows up in our dreams. Our subconscious is most active in the dream state and in our theta brainwaves as well, heading into and out of the dream state. And so it's no mistake that sleep becomes interrupted or we have really difficult dreams when these feelings, this inner conflict and turmoil is taking place. Obsessing over it, and I talked about before as well, this like unclean sort of like F you, like this is how it is, self-righteous kind of energy. Yeah. So the boundary can be true, but when that energy or attitude is coming through with it, that's revealing that there's actually something that has not been resolved within yourself, in order to feel really grounded and really beautifully accepting and neutral and trusting and calm in the outcome that has taken place. And then there's a flip side of that as well, which I touched on before too, of using it as a protective mechanism and feeling like it's the only way you can put distance between yourself and another person and keep them out and really create the space and the safety that you feel like you need for your nervous system. And so as this podcast progresses, I know that we will touch on how setting the boundary is actually just the first step to a brave boundary. It's not as black and white and like done and dusted as that. And so, when we're having this experience of like, I need to set this boundary to feel safety, I need to set this boundary to create space for myself so that I can operate, so my nervous system can calm down. It's not the boundary alone that's going to achieve that. Brave boundaries have a few more pieces to it, which is what we're going to get to. So that I share all of that with you, my love, so that you have a working concept of what it looks like, feels like, sounds like when there can be some triggers involved with a boundary. What I want to do next is contrast that And part of the reason this podcast episode has come about is last week on the Reveal and Rise coaching calls, two gorgeous women back to back just shared such powerful fucking wins around where their brave boundary setting is at. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is just like I couldn't explain it better to you myself as a working example. And I'll give you some context of the type of boundary that has been set. When it sounds, looks, and feels in the body as that integrated, loving, strong but loving, clear, direct but loving, brave boundary that has healing involved with it as well. So the first one comes from a client, and the way that she shared this is going to explain the context of it as well. So I'm just going to read exactly what she said. I've got permission to share these, by the way. She said, I'm making progress in how I deal with my children's father. There was a major gaslighting incident by him, and I was just like, no. And then I had so much compassion for myself. It's been so hard to set boundaries, and I'm getting better. But the fact that I used to live with that every day, I believed that I was always wrong, that I was clueless. I really felt for myself, and I also thought, no, not anymore. I haven't been ruminating about it at all. I set the boundary and that's it. Yeah. So this is an example of one of those integrated, loving, brave boundaries that is really clean. It doesn't have any of these inner conflicts or turmoils or energies or attitudes attached to it that I spoke about previously. And then this second client of mine who is navigating a divorce at the moment, here's what she shared. She shared about her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband. He had reached out and asked if I would be able to do something that he wanted. It threw me into an emotional tailspin for a while, and I was very proud of myself because I honoured my need to have time to process that. I had no desire to respond whilst in the emotional tailspin. Today, it was 6 days since he sent the text, and someone asked what I was going to do and if I was going to do what he asked of me. I'd gotten enough clarity already within the first day. However, by this point, so day 6, all the emotions had left too, which was my intention, not to make a heated decision. And I said, in response to this person, I don't want to. There's zero benefit to me saying yes. He benefits immensely and I benefit not at all. It's just that simple. And I listened to this woman share this on the coaching call, obviously. I was there. And that's literally how she said it. She just said, I just don't want to, like there's zero benefit for me and he benefits immensely. And it's really actually that simple that I just don't want to do it. And she went on to say, it felt so amazing after so long of doing what he wanted or worrying about what he thought or trying to make sure I didn't upset him, to now be able to say, nah, that's not right for me. And that being it. And she said, I was shocked that even within the first day, I'd found that grounding already, even though I still had the emotions to move through. And it was a cool conversation because I got to say to her, I'm not shocked at all. Like, I'm watching you do all of this somatic healing. I'm watching you step into your queen energy and your personal power around what's possible for you, even though at times you're terrified and it feels messy and you only know the next step. You don't know the next 5 steps. I'm watching you do all of this, and I'm watching you use connection-based communication as part of the process. And this is what happens. So, I'm not shocked at all. But I hear her because so often I'll speak to women and they'll say to me, before they become a client, they'll say to me, if I could even just, halve the amount of discomfort that I'm in, if this anxiety could halve, if this indecision, if I could just believe in myself a little bit more, if this procrastination could halve, I'd be thrilled. Right. And so for a lot of women, because this isn't talked about broadly, and it's not the norm, right, to name loudly and proudly, I want my life to be better than this. I don't want to live through all of these nervous system reactions that I know are trauma-based. They're coming from coping mechanisms from childhood. As an adult, I don't want to do that anymore, right? It's not the norm and it's not common. And so often it really is surprising for a woman how much it can actually change. And I do think that there's a little bit of a protective mechanism at first too with, well, I don't know if this is possible for me. Don't know if I'm capable of it. I don't know if I'm willing to do all the things I would need to do. And so let's just shoot for like 50% improvement to begin with. But it's really beautiful to watch that shift as they begin to gather the evidence through practical tools of how powerful they actually are, and that their answers are there within them, inside of them, and that they can trust themselves. They just didn't have those practical tools to be able to do that. So I share that with you so you've got the contrast and maybe a little bit more data around what it can look, feel, sound like when there is a trigger attached to a true, right, authentic boundary for you versus when there's not. Okay, no, it's still going off. I was just about to say, yet again, my washing machine is going off in the background. I'm just going to fix that and I will be back. Okay, I'm back. I think I've put something a little bit too heavy in there, and every time it gets to the spin, it's not happy with me, but I'll deal with that later. What I want to talk about next is why this happens, why we can set a boundary that is definitely true and right for us, and yet we feel all of this inner turmoil. And I also want to talk about what you can do about it, because there's definitely some things that can be done. Before we go deeper into this, I really want to acknowledge how hard of a conversation it is that we're having in this episode. And I know that because I've lived it. It's been, gosh, like gut-wrenching and so frustrating, and just felt more than anything, probably wildly unfair at certain times in my life where I've needed to set boundaries with people who I've been so willing to try and come into connection with, or try and resolve something with, or set a new pattern in the relationship. And the desire from the other party actually just isn't there, or I don't feel like I'm being heard, and I feel like a broken record. And I'm just saying the same things over and over again. And it's gotten to the point where I've often felt like I'm being disrespected, or I'm being dismissed, I'm being disregarded, I'm being treated as someone whose needs aren't important, right? Which doesn't feel good at all. And when we choose to allow that to continue, absolutely that is going to affect our self-esteem, our self-belief. It is definitely going to see us living against the true, real, authentic version of ourselves, which if we do that for too long is absolutely going to bring in, our soul is going to need to speak to us through the body, and it's going to turn up the dial on discomfort. And if you've been here for a while listening, you'll know in the past for me, that looked like blacking out from panic attacks, huge anxiety, like struggling to leave the house, deep depression is the other end of the scale as well, and an enormous list of chronic health symptoms, whether that was migraines or hormone issues or gut issues like bloating or constipation, skin rashes, swelling. My eyelids used to swell. Sometimes some of my eyelashes would fall out, like so many different chronic symptoms. And something that's quite cool when we learn how to deal with it, so it becomes cool, it's no longer something we feel like we're drowning in, is that each of us will have a bit of a pattern in our body that once we learn it and we know it, it only has to pop up a tiny bit if we are either falling back into that cycle of not honoring what's true for us, or maybe there is some future iteration of us that's being called forward that asks us to evolve more and leave behind some of what has been 100% right for us, but we haven't detected that fully yet. And so the soul is going to say, hey, it's time. We need to talk about this. We need to see this. We're going to create some discomfort that has you then getting curious about, hey, what's going on here? And you begin to discover it, and it reveals itself. So yeah, I really, want to empathize and very much speak into how much I understand that this is a really difficult conversation. And often when we set a brave boundary, we already feel like we've done the hard thing. We already feel like we've taken so much ownership and responsibility. We already feel like we've stepped into our queen energy. And then we're confronted with this situation when we still feel discomfort and triggers where we're like, you fucking serious? Like there's fucking more that I have to take accountability for, that I need to step into my power around to get in the driver's seat of. And so if that is you, my love, I hear you. I hear you, and you're not doing it wrong. This is part of progressing forwards. And we do, to an extent, get to decide how much time we spend there in the this is fucking unfair story. It's really important that we honor that and we're real with that and we don't bypass it and try and push it down. And if we keep playing into that for longer than what we actually need to, that will then create dis-ease, dysfunction, disharmony in our life that is just not at all pleasant to be living with, and that absolutely feels like it's putting blocks and hurdles in the way of us living how we want to live and in a way that would feel good. So this is one of those loving but bullshit-free conversations that is very signature of my coaching style. And I think I was even saying on the last podcast episode that this is the epitome of love to me, telling the truth in an empathetic and loving way, but very clean, very direct, no sugarcoating, no wrapping up in cotton, no beating around the bush. Like, let's actually talk about what's happening, because only then can we actually decide if we want to change it. And remember, my love, when we see what is happening, that does not mean we are bad. That is not something we judge ourselves for. That is not something we create more shame and go into the shame cycle around. It is data. Yeah. And we don't have to use that data and change anything if we don't want to. That gets to be a choice too. But if we want a result that's different to what we've got, we will need to look at, okay, well, what would need to be done differently if I decided to do that? Yeah. This is what creates freedom. And so this is why I also say, cutting someone out of your life or removing someone from your life or creating distance and calling it a boundary isn't healing, right? It's absolutely a first step. But as I shared with you above, there's a big difference between setting a boundary and feeling that it's integrated and that it's neutral and that we can still express love and compassion and understanding for that person from a distance and fully accept actually who they are. Because there's safety within ourselves, there's certainty within ourselves, versus this bitter taste still being left in our mouth that is translating as some form of sensation or discomfort in the mind body. Yeah. And so one of the biggest things we need to acknowledge here, and this gets to be like a really easy, clean one-liner to come back to, is that if you're still triggered, even after you've set the boundary, then the lesson is still playing out for you. It hasn't ended yet. And the lesson is playing out for you because it is calling forward more of your beautiful, brilliant self. Yeah. It is calling you forward to emerge out the other side of this messy, muddy, difficult, challenging chapter, right? It doesn't want you to stay dancing in both, right? So it's like you're not doing it how you used to do it, but you actually haven't fully come out the other side yet. And so the reward of having done the first step of setting the boundary isn't being felt yet. And you're fucking deserving of that full reward. Yeah. We don't just want some of the breadcrumbs of the bread loaf. We don't just want a spoonful of the slice of cake. We want the whole fucking slice of cake. Yeah. And so that's how you can begin to create a relationship with a triggered experience in your body. Is this is actually revealing to me where I'm not free yet, or where this lesson is not complete yet. And when I do complete this lesson and move through it, that's when I'm going to feel more in tune with my beauty and my brilliance, as opposed to this like, oh, like something is still off here. Like, why can't I get this out of my head? Like, I just want to fucking sleep through the night. Yeah. Because, if we want to feel at peace internally and experience freedom, we must be able, we have to be able to tell the truth about where we are not feeling free. If we want to experience peace and freedom internally, we have to be able to tell the truth about where we are not feeling free, right? Where is it that we're feeling constricted? Where is there tension? Where are we still feeling a little bit tangled and like something is unresolved? It keeps popping up in our face, right? And here's why. If this discomfort that you're experiencing was truly about the other person and about what they did, what they said, how they behaved, how they should have shown up but didn't, what they have to blame, what role they played in this, if it was truly about that, why is it still being felt in your body after you've set the boundary? Yeah. After you have supposedly, inverted commas, moved on. What I would suggest here is there's been like everything I've just been saying, there's been a partial moving on. You're in a stage of moving through it, and maybe it has been your perception or your knowledge to this point that moving past it was just setting the boundary and just holding the boundary. And you're now beginning to discover actually there's this whole other collection of skills and parts to a brave boundary that I want to learn about because I want the rewards. I want to feel content. I want to fully let this go. I don't want to think about this anymore. Yeah. Now, as I said before, this just feels so hard when we're the person that feels like we've been wronged, that we've been on the receiving end of really fucking poor, bad behavior. It feels like a bitter pill to swallow that, oh my gosh, I am still the one that has to clean this up, or I am still the one that needs to address this. And so I just want you to feel so heard in that and to know that we're not skipping over that. That is part of the process too. And it is just one part of the process. So just as setting the boundary initially is one part, feeling the unfairness, feeling the resentment, feeling the like, this is bullshit, that is a part of it as well. But we can't stay there or nothing changes. We can either choose to stay triggered or we can choose to get free. Yeah, that's the difference. Now, I want to move into sharing some questions that are going to be really helpful when posed and when explored curiously to get clear on what is the location of this trigger, where is it sitting in my body, how is it feeling, how would I describe it, so that you can gain the clarity as to what the actual problem still is, like what's feeling problematic, what's feeling disturbing, what's feeling like I'm not okay with it, and therefore my nervous system is in this stress response state of feeling triggered, because then we can respond to it. We can't respond to what we don't know about, and that's why I fucking love high quality questions. But before we go there, what I do want to share as well as a coaching reflection is that if this is a pattern you see in yourself, right, of setting the brave boundary, it's true and it's right for you, but then after setting the boundary, you're still feeling triggered. There's still this internal chaos going on, mind, body. It's really important to know that this pattern that I've just explained, it's not the root subconscious pattern. Yeah, it's not deep enough to be the real problem. There is a reason why you're able to set the boundary, but then not go any further with the remaining steps of a brave boundary, providing you know that there are more steps, providing you know that when you feel an emotion in your body, that's your emotion and that's your responsibility to find a solution for. If you know that and it's not being addressed, there's a subconscious reason for that. It's not like on purpose every day you're waking up and thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm so anxious and I'm so angry at that person, or I can't stop thinking about that. And I keep like, I can tell I'm finger pointing and I'm blaming, but you know what? I'm still going to feel this anger today. I am still going to finger point and blame other people today. I am still going to feel this resentment today because that's what I want to do. No, that is not what is happening. And this is, a major part of subconscious programming is we're not doing it on purpose. And it's not what we want to have happening on an intellectual, logical, mind-brain overview of the situation, and yet it's still playing out. So we need to get clear on, okay, what is it that causes me to want to avoid that emotion? Or what is it that causes me to keep to, like, essentially still what's happening is I'm like sweeping this bitterness, or I'm sweeping this dissatisfaction, this discomfort under the rug, even though I know it's there, right? And often we won't have the answer to that question. It won't be within our intellectual, logical awareness. So here's what I want you to know. What is very, 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 very often the actual root cause of this boundary situation that we're talking about in this episode is the good girl programming. That is what is sitting at the root of what is going on. And this experience with boundaries is just one of many expressions of how that good girl programming is showing up. And so if we only focus on this boundary expression of how it's playing out as a problem, we're not dealing with the root, right? So you might get really good at setting boundaries, but now it's just going to pop up in another different area of your life, right? And so the good girl programming is when we learned or observed in childhood subconsciously, remember? So it's not like we were intellectually taking notes. And when we've subconsciously learned something, that means it might not be really obvious to us that it's playing out as a pattern. Yeah. So in childhood, we've observed or we've learned that when I'm happy and when I do what I'm told, I'm seen as good. I'm seen as convenient. I get love, I get connection, I'm included. I get the tick of approval, basically. Yeah. When I'm unhappy, when I'm difficult, when I'm outspoken, when I have a different opinion, when I refuse to do what I'm told, well, now I'm seen as bad. I'm naughty, I'm inconvenient. And now I'm excluded. I'm actually sent to my room to be alone, yeah, away from love and connection. And hello, rejection, fear of abandonment, yeah, programming being formed over and over and over again. And this doesn't have to be to the extreme, by the way. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that there was violence or aggression or that there was even necessarily yelling. As a tiny little child, we don't have the sense-making ability to look at the situation and be like, oh, I really don't think mum and dad are trying to punish me here. I think they're just having a hard day. Or I think they're just using the parenting strategy that they genuinely think is best for me to learn how to thrive and survive in this world. No, like that logic is not on board as a child. And this is when all of our subconscious programming is being downloaded. And unless that is reviewed at some point as an adult, it is still playing out, my love. Yeah. So, that's the first part of the good girl programming and patterning. But then when we layer into that, maybe your parents were unable to regulate their nervous system, or they didn't have skills of emotional awareness or emotional intelligence, right? That alone, even when certain things haven't been specifically about you, and it's not you being sent to your room, that being experienced and you being exposed to that over and over again as your primary environment teaches your nervous system, yeah, something your nervous system learns that is that I am safer when the people around me are happier, yeah. There is less chaos, there is less dysfunction, there is less unpredictability and unsafety when I keep the people around me happy. And that's like an inbuilt, very, very intelligent, resourceful part as a child that we're already responding out of without intellectually realizing it. And this is where, needing to be perfect, needing to get things right first go, needing to be the best at things, not being okay with being a learner or getting things wrong or making mistakes or having people dislike you or disagree with you comes from. It's where those patterns of achieving, yeah, like needing to get the next promotion, needing to have a certain status, needing to be viewed in a certain way as successful, the helper, the fixer, the people pleasing. This is where all of those patterns come from, is this deeper good girl programming, right? Because when your caregivers were happy, there were less emotional reactions and unpredictability in your environment. And that was very important to you as a child because your nervous system didn't know how to cope with that. And so the less of it your nervous system had to deal with, the better. And by the way, my love, this can all have been taking place even if your parents never, ever, ever, ever had an intention of making you feel this way. Yeah, this isn't about whether your parents were trying to punish you or not. Like I said, our little nervous systems and our tiny little brains as kids doesn't have the capacity to add that into the mix when you're making sense of the world in your first 7 years of life, right? Now, if you hear yourself in this at all, something I want you to know, which is exciting, I've just been feeling this intuitive build of speak more about this. So there's going to be more podcast episodes coming on the Good Girl Subconscious program. So there's more coming. Keep coming back and listening. And let me know if this is helpful too, because I love having conversations about you, sort of, with you. I do ask you questions. I love having conversations with my audience because at the end of the day, I spend hours upon hours creating content like this podcast episode every single week. Of course, I fucking want it to be as relevant and as comprehensible and digestible for you as possible. So come and share with me on email, gemma@gemmahanley.com, or on Instagram. Send me a DM and let me know, what parts resonated, what didn't. Do you have more questions? Do you want me to explain something more to you? I'm so happy to do that. Now, I want to circle back to what we've been talking about in this episode around the brave boundary taking. And, I really want to talk about why is it that you can set the boundary that's right for you and then still feel so horrible afterwards. We're going to circle back to that. Here's part of what goes down with now that you've got that good girl pattern understanding happening, is that often for a lot of us, the point at which we set a boundary is often actually a breaking point or it's a tipping point. It's the point of this has to change. I can't handle this. I can't take any more of this. This is not working, right? Even though we might have known quite a little bit earlier and sensed that, I really need to change this. I really need to say no to this thing, or I really need to ask for this to be done differently, or I really need to share what isn't feeling good to me so that this can change. We'll typically wait until we're at breaking point, or there's this tipping point where something significant will probably happen. Either it's the culmination of so much of it that you're like, no, this has to change now. Or it might be that there's been a particularly big event that has felt clarifying enough for you where you find it within yourself to be the source of permission that it's okay for you to set this boundary, or you can justify setting this boundary. Or, if you're one of my clients, we will have had conversations and I'll have been able to reflect all the different parts back to you and you feel super confident that, okay, I'm taking too much responsibility here, or okay, I'm not overreacting here. I'm not being the drama queen here. I'm not being too difficult, too sensitive, too much here. It's actually okay for me to have this desire, and it's okay for me to have this need, and it's okay for me to want to be in relationships where I feel respected, right? That's typically what takes place in order for us to set the boundary that's right for us. And I want to offer an analogy here that really helps to explain what's taking place. It's like you've realized your house is on fire, yeah? And you've hit the emergency button, or like you've dialed 000 or 911 or whatever the number is in your country, because you're like, okay, this is a fire and this fire needs to be put out. I'm going to call the people that can put this fire out, and they've arrived. The fire brigade has arrived, right? And that's the part of the analogy where you set the boundary. What happens when they arrive is that you feel a little bit safer. It feels like there's less danger now, right? However, the fire is still yet to be put out, right? So the fire brigade might be here. So their trucks are present, their sirens are on, they're in their outfits that keep them safe from the fire. They're maybe even unwinding the hoses. They're assessing the situation so that they can get the best position to be able to fight the fire from. And, maybe it's time for them to start turning on the water and putting out the fire, but it hasn't happened yet. This is where some of this triggering stuff, the nervous system in a stress response that we've been talking about so far in this conversation on this episode comes into play, right? Is when we set the boundary, we're creating an initial level of safety, an initial level of response. Yeah, we're stepping into an initial level of our queen energy and our responsibility for changing the situation and getting it closer to where we want it to be, right? Meaning putting the fire out. That's what we want. That's what we want to get closer to. As part of a brave boundary, we need to acknowledge where we've stopped at hitting the emergency button and getting the fire brigade here. We need to acknowledge there's actually still steps that need to be taken until this fire will be put out. And if those steps aren't taken, the fire is actually going to keep burning, right? And this is why I say that setting the boundary can be the first step in healing, right? So cutting people out of your life, removing people from your life, creating distance, that can be the first step in healing, but that alone is not healing unless you're genuinely feeling like those two clients that I read out, and that's how you're explaining it. You're like, I just did it and now it's done. And I haven't even thought, I'm not ruminating over it. I'm not thinking about it. I've actually moved on and I'm living my life. And I forget that even happened, right? And so the reason why is that, the reason why I bring in this analogy is it is the good girl patterning that will be stopping you from turning on the hose and putting out the fire, right? It's the stories and the beliefs that it's not okay for me to have this emotion. I have this emotion and it means that I'm broken. It means that I'm weak. It means that I'm not coping. It means that I'm not successful. It means that other people are better than me and I'm less than, I'm not good enough, I'm failing. There must be something wrong with me, right? Because as a child, it wasn't okay for you to have emotions, and it definitely wasn't okay for you to have big emotions. And if you did, you just needed to get over them as quickly as possible. You certainly weren't being invited into an expression of that emotion where your parents sat down beside you and asked you, what are you feeling? And where are you feeling that in your body? What does it sound like? Do you want to stomp it out? Should we punch some pillows? Yeah. What might help you feel better, right? Most of us were not on the receiving end of that style of parenting. And so it doesn't even enter our contemplation, for one, that we're entitled to that experience. We're allowed to feel our emotions and we can create that space for ourselves. Two, we just don't even know how to do that. We weren't given the practical skills. And three, we've been programmed to make that mean that we're too sensitive, we're too dramatic. Yeah. One of the things that I heard a lot was you're such a drama queen, right? And I probably was, because the first level of my emotions weren't being validated. My experience, was not being heard. I didn't feel seen and cared for and loved, right? And this is, we're talking here in instances, not as a blanket statement. And so that good girl programming is part of what is popping up without you even realizing it, and saying, yes, whilst you're waking up with this overthinking, this ruminating, this emotion that is cycling in the body, feeling pretty horrible and rubbish, and there's a lot of loudness inside your mind and body, it's not okay for you to fully acknowledge that. It's not okay for you to admit that you need to address that. And even if you did admit it, you don't know how to address it, right? And so I want to provide that context of, it really is not as simple as I have a problem and I'm not helping myself. It's not. And that's why I'm very, very fucking passionate about making sure we do get to the root of what subconscious programming is being automated and sent out without us even realizing it. Okay, we're about to wrap up, but I want to talk first about what to do with the fire. Yeah, how do we put it out? So you need to be bringing in somatic practices. The pattern, the subconscious patterns, the emotions, the memories, the beliefs, they are in the body. Yeah. If they were as simple as thinking a better thought or creating an affirmation or telling a better story or creating a reframe, it'd be done. It would literally be done. If you could just read a self-help book and be like, oh, cool, I need to just say those things to myself. I just need to have this attitude. It would be done. But we can't override our subconscious programming and the automation of how we're experiencing life, what we find triggering, the type of information that our brain is actually bringing in, because our brain in every moment is deleting, distorting, and generalizing information based on our subconscious programming. None of that changes until we address the stored trauma, emotions, memories, limiting beliefs that are in the body. So somatic work is very, very important. One of the ways I teach somatics with my clients is that we start with some high quality questions that help us retrieve data from their subconscious. And then, so high quality question, we get the answer from the subconscious, that is data. Yeah. We then use that data to inform which somatic practice is going to be most powerful for that specific individual woman in that specific individual instance. Yeah. In the case of the good girl programming, patterning, it's always going to include inner child work, which helps us go back to our childhood and work with the memory, the event, the perception of self and therefore belief that was created in that moment, and release and bring up and out of the body any emotions that are still there that again cannot be found or detected intellectually through the mind or through mindset work. This is nervous system, subconscious, somatics, right? And, you know, by the way, with this inner style of inner child work that I use as a somatic practice, my clients aren't dependent on me to do that to them or to do that for them. I am teaching them through guided practices, through live somatic sessions, through daily coaching access that they have to me to ask for support, to ask for tweaks, to share with me what's happening in their practice so I can give them feedback so they can change it. And so they're learning for their own personal use and their own personal healing as an individual, how to go back to childhood and reprogram and rewrite these patterns and beliefs and let go of the emotions that are stored so that they're not still having reactions as an adult, right? Because that does not feel good. And then this is a skill that they learn for life, not just while they're working with me as a client. So I want to give you some examples of these questions. I've got 4 of them that can help you begin to retrieve some data based on you as an individual, which will then begin to inform, okay, you know, what needs to be worked with here so that this trigger doesn't happen for me anymore. And I really can feel at peace about what's happened in the past, live in the now, and then continue creating future now moments that fucking light me up inside, right? So here is question number 1. Feel free to obviously hit pause, write these down. They're brilliant to journal on. Remember, you're connecting with your subconscious intuition, not your logical intellectual mind. The first question is this: what emotion am I pushing down because if I was to admit it, I'd be letting them win? Yeah, remember, this is in context with the boundary that you've set that's true and right for you, and yet you're still feeling triggered, even though you've set and followed through on that boundary. So what emotion am I pushing down because if I was to admit it, I'd be letting them win, them being the person the boundary has been set with. Number 2, what story would I tell if I looked for the most pure and good intentions of everyone involved? This really helps us to unravel blame and finger pointing and maybe only looking at half of the story. Yeah. What story would I tell if I looked for the most pure and good intentions of everyone involved? That's the second question. The third question is, where am I diminishing the learnings I gained from this lesson I needed? Where am I diminishing the learnings I gained from this lesson I needed? Because everything that is put on our path by God, universe, life, it's there to help us evolve. And if we didn't need it, it would not be there. Again, my love, do not make this mean you are a bad, wrong, shameworthy person. That is not true. Every single one of us, myself included, we need lessons to evolve. Yeah, so where am I diminishing the learnings I gained from this lesson that I needed? Number 4, what do I get to avoid by continuing to blame or villainize this person? What do I get to avoid by continuing to blame or villainize this person? That's the 4th question. Before I wrap up, because this is getting long and obviously I could teach a whole day on this, but on these questions, I just want to say something that's going to help with keeping an open, curious mind, is that these questions are designed for your subconscious. There might be a part of you that wants to reject them, that doesn't understand why you would ask them. Try and park that to the side. Yeah. See what happens when you answer these questions, right? When you hear a question like, what do I get to avoid by continuing to blame or villainize this person? It might sound like, oh, here we go, I'm in the wrong again. What we're actually looking for and what we're unearthing and revealing beneath that is, oh my gosh, I don't have to feel this deep hurt if I keep being angry at this person and blaming them. But if I don't look at this deep hurt, I also have to hold all of this discomfort and all of this murky, unclean, nasty, uncomfortable energy that I know is not the truth of who I am. Yeah. Remember, the only person that benefits or suffers from what you're feeling inside is you. Yeah. So there is so much depth to how these questions have been structured. Like I said, I could talk about them for a day. And by the way, they're not designed so that you go back on the boundary that you've set that is true and right for you. Yeah. Sometimes when someone is newer to inner work and they have their first experiences with actually feeling really neutral and content and being able to show love and compassion to someone who has maybe really hurt them in the past or acted really poorly, they can take that to mean that they can now let this person back into their life, or the boundary wasn't needed. Yeah, untrue. If it genuinely is a boundary that has been true and right for you, these questions are not there as a permission piece for you to regulate your nervous system and then be like, well, I'm not triggered anymore, so I guess I'll just go back to the way things were, just in case that comes up for you. All right, my love, we're going to wrap this here. Please come reach out, have a chat. If you've got any questions, I'd love to hear what your the most important thing is that you heard in this episode that you're going to be using. And like I said, keep your eye out for more of this content around the Good Girl programming.
Thank you for being here for this conversation, my love. If you would like more free resources, if you'd like to learn about my programs or coaching opportunities, you can find all of that information at my website, gemmahanley.com. I'll link it below in the show notes. And if you would like to connect daily, head over and find me on Instagram. My handle there is Gemma E. Hanley, and I reply to all of my DMs there personally. If you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please share it with someone. You never know who needs to hear one little thing to take their day from feeling stuck and heavy to light and free. See you on the next one.